Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Dyleup's Workshop. Thanks for tuning in and watching another one of our how-to videos. Now we've got another maintenance item to take care of on our Mercedes here. Now today we're going to be taking care of our cooling system. This thing has a bit of a problem in cold weather. It doesn't actually heat up, but it's not a big deal. I've done a bit of troubleshooting and I'll show you what I'm talking about. As you can see, I have a manual thermostat in here right now. This thing doesn't actually heat up in cold weather, and I'll show you why. Just a little more information on the problem that I was having. The car wasn't heating up. Well, it was, but eventually. It took about 30 minutes to get some real heat coming out of the heater in the actual vehicle itself. Now, the reason this thing isn't heating up is because we have a problem with our thermostat. It's stuck open. Now, because it's stuck open, it constantly lets coolant circle in and out of the radiator, even when it's cold, and it takes way too long for the car to actually warm up to operating temperature. I know there's no other problems with the car because it does heat up eventually. I'm not concerned about our water pump down here. The belt looks great. There's no doubt in my mind that it's a problem with this thermostat. Now, a thermostat is just a temperature-controlled valve that shuts off the flow of coolant to the radiator until it actually needs it. Now, this is pretty much everything we're going to need to change the coolant in our car and our thermostat. The most important one here is our thermostat. You can have a look at the part number right there. We obviously have our Mercedes branded coolant because, well, duh. Funnel, pliers, screwdriver, 10, 12, 19 millimeter sockets, extension, 3/8 ratchet, tool bowl, and a flashlight. Don't forget, lots of drain pans. Now is a good time to double check the part number on the thermostat itself with the box, just to make sure you got exactly what you ordered. As you can see there, our part numbers do line up. This is our thermostat. This is going to go in that car right there in that housing where I told you earlier. First things first, we're going to drain our coolant. Now, to get that process started, I'm going to take off our radiator cap. I'm going to set that aside so we don't lose it. Now this opens up the cooling system and it's going to help it drain much faster. Now, as we go underneath the car, we're looking underneath our radiator. This hose right here is what we're going to take off to start draining our coolant. Now, in order to loosen our radiator hose, I'm going to take our Phillips head screwdriver and just turn this counterclockwise and loosen off our clamp. Next, I'm going to take this clamp off quickly and drain it into our bucket. This hopefully won't make much of a mess. And with our bucket underneath our drain hose, I'm just going to put some pliers on it. Careful not to tear it. And just wiggle it off slowly. We'll see our gush of coolant starting to come out. This has been on here a while. There we go. Now that it's slowed down to a trickle, that's most of the coolant out of the radiator itself. The next step is going to be draining the engine block. To drain the block, we're looking for the drain plug, and I'll show you where that is. Right underneath the exhaust manifold. We're looking at this bolt right here. That's a 19 millimeter. Unfortunately, this next step is going to be a bit messy. Because of where that drain plug is on the engine block, that coolant's going to come out pretty much on the engine mount and the steering linkage underneath the car. Now, I have a drain pan position down there on the floor that you can see, and hopefully I'm going to catch most of it. Don't be surprised if you spill some. Now take our 19mm socket, put it on the plug. This is probably going to take some effort. Probably help that I have it set to loosen, not tighten. There we go. That wasn't so bad. Here comes the messy part. Taking that plug out. Yeah. Now might be a great time to inspect the mess I told you to be expecting. Well, I got most of it. Now that that's stopped dripping and I've cleaned up my floor, I want to point out the crush washer on our drain plug. And this is a little aluminum or alloy plug, and realistically I could probably use it again. However, I have a new copper one that I'm going to put on here and put back in the block. As you can see through this hole here, if you look all the way down past there, you can see the drain hole to the block is still open. I haven't put our drain plug back in with our new crush washer. I'm just going to go ahead and do that right now. Now that our drain plug is back in, I'm going to tighten that down. I don't know the actual torque specs of this bolt right off the top of my head, but as with any drain plug, you're not trying to tighten it down enough just to break it off. You're trying to tighten it down just to snug it up, crush that washer, and create a good seal against the block. Perfect. And the drain plug's back in the block. We're going to go underneath the car since everything's finished draining. We're going to put our drain hose back on. We're going to tighten up our hose clamp. Now that that hose clamp is done up tight, we've sealed everything up from the bottom. Now's a good chance to have a look at our coolant. And as you can see, it looks pretty gross. I have no idea how long that's been in there, so now's a perfect chance to change it. With the hoses and plugs back in, we're going to take off this top drain hose here to free up some room to remove this thermostat housing cover off. 3 10mm bolts and 2 12mm bolts. Now with all the hardware out of the way, thermostat housing is a little bit stuck, and we can give this a light tap with the mallet. I'm just using a rubber mallet so I don't damage anything. There we go. Just enough to knock it loose. And here's our thermostat. Now it's important to note, if we can focus on there, please and thank you, we can see that that says 87 degrees Celsius. Now, it doesn't say it in the same place as our new one, but it's actually rated 87 degrees, focus please, right there. So, all we have to do is put our new thermostat in our housing and button that back up. Now this next tool isn't absolutely necessary. You could get just any regular old funnel, but I needed a good excuse to try one of these spill-free funnel kits, and I'll show you how easy this is going to be. Now that I have our funnel set up there, we're going to get ready to pour our coolant into the car. Now, according to the manual, this thing takes approximately 3 gallons of coolant. Always make sure that you have extra when you do this. I'm sure you can see by now how much easier it is having a spill-free funnel to pour all this coolant into the car, and I don't have to hold on to that at all. And a little trick when pouring your coolant, don't hold it from the top, hold it from the side, or even with the handle closer to the bottom, And that way the coolant won't actually slosh back and forth and splash out as it's coming and make it hard to pull. Squeeze your hoses too, just to facilitate getting some of the air out of the system. And I can actually hear, this is about the 2nd gallon of coolant that I poured into the car now at this point. I can actually hear it filling up the radiator. And now that I'm not seeing any bubbles coming out of the funnel as I'm squeezing this hose, the next step is going to be to start the car, to get the water pump cycling the coolant. And the most important part about doing this is turning on the heat inside of the cabin to make sure that that new coolant is going to cycle in the heater core. Now that the car is actually running, I've made sure I open the door to my shop so I don't poison myself with carbon monoxide. Don't forget that if you're working inside. And as you can see, the thermostat is closed, so that's not cycling that coolant yet. We're going to have to wait a moment for that coolant to actually warm up. So the thermostat's going to open up, and then it will start to suck that coolant down into the radiator as it should. Now with the heat on in the car, I can already feel the heat starting to come out of this, and it's still going to take some time. Plus, according to our temperature gauge over there, we're not even at 87 degrees Celsius yet, so that thermostat still hasn't even opened up. I've let the car run for a little while now, and you can see the color of the fluid has actually changed a little bit. Unfortunately, I couldn't get any distilled water to flush the actual radiator out, so I can still see some dirt in there. I'm actually going to take that out and let the car run again for a little while. Now I've cycled the coolant out of this thing again, put some new coolant in it one more time, let it bleed out, and it's throwing heat exactly as it should be. And it's important to note, if you think this is out of your technical ability, there's no shame in getting it done by a professional at a shop. So thanks for tuning in and watching another episode of Dyleup's Workshop. Hopefully you found some useful information here while I changed my coolant and thermostat.